So, I'd like to welcome everybody here. This is Dana Beal. I'm the author of The Extraordinary Workplace, Replacing Fear with Trust and Compassion. And we've been talking before we started this webinar about how excited we were to have this conversation because tonight I have Mark Crowley, the author of Lead from the Heart. A really outstanding book. I read it myself and just thought it was wonderful. He talks about transformational leadership for the 21st century. And I've been doing this work for about 15 years, talking to organizations about their workplace culture. And when I read an article recently that Mark Crowley wrote in Fast Company magazine, I was just so thrilled to see such a well-written article that addressed so many of the key issues in today's workplace that I feel more and more people are really grasping and wanting to see a change related to these areas. And so I wrote him, and we have since become friends and talked on the phone. And so I invited him to do this webinar with me tonight, and he said he'd be delighted. So just to tell you a little bit more first about me, then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Mark. In case you don't know me, I'm going to go to the next slide here. I have worked with a multitude of industries, including, for some reason my slide isn't going for, there we go, including a multitude of industries. I was a business consultant, but I've also been an employee as the marketing director for numerous organizations. And during that time, I began to see that many times what got in the way of people accomplishing all the success that they wanted, or even if they were successful, a lot of people were unhappy. I began to realize that there is really a problem in the workplace culture. People were stressed out, people were competitive, internally competitive, and I began to listen to what people oftentimes would tell me. I later became a consultant, and people would often tell me things that they wouldn't tell their own leadership. But there were a lot of people that were very unhappy in the workplace, and I believe you can't do well if you're unhappy. You end up feeling drained and depleted and oftentimes criticized. And so I wrote my book, and I began speaking all over the country about replacing fear with trust and compassion, because I believe the old model of fear-based management is destructive. I've now spoken to over 400 businesses and national and international conventions. I've been interviewed on over 70 radio shows. And my audience is, just to give you an idea, that whatever industry you're in, audience, whoever is out there listening to us today, which, by the way, it does span anywhere all over the planet now that we have the internet. So welcome people, everybody, wherever you're calling in from. But what I want you to know is that having worked in so many different industries, I know that the problem that exists with the internal competition and the drama and sometimes real lack of any caring is happening in all industries, because I've worked with hospitals, physician practices, CPA and law firms, banks, insurance companies, government, retail, hospitality industry, the retirement industry. And I forgot to even mention, I also was a teacher for 8 years. My first career was to be a teacher. And I see often the same problem, the lack of caring, the lack of compassion for one another in the workplace. So that's my story. And I have since found a lot of people are interested in hearing how we can bring about a change. I don't think it's enough. And so I love to find people that are also just as interested. And so that's how I want to introduce to you Mark Crowley. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Dana.
I'm so glad you're here. And I want to just tell people a little bit about you. First of all, you are a businessman at heart. So you didn't just write a book about the heart. You've already been an experienced businessman. You've had 20 plus years career as a senior leader most recently as the National Sales Manager for an investments product at one of the U.S.'s largest financial institutions. And you were named Leader of the Year, so you do know something about leadership, I would say. And but you said here, or told me, and I put this in here, that ambition is to influence the first major change to your ambition to change the workplace leadership in a century and to give managers across the globe informed permission to care for and support their people. Wow, that's a really wonderful goal. How did you come up with that one?
How did I come up with that as an ambition?
Yes, I mean, it's a big one, the 21st
That's a,
century.
that's it's a big question, Dana, and I guess the easiest way for me to answer it is to take you through sort of three major steps in my life that took me there. The first one will seem unrelated, and it honestly seemed entirely unrelated to me in my life until I was about 40 years old, literally 40 years old,
Hmm.
in my career for a good 20 years, and had this epiphany that how I grew up had much to do with influencing how I was leading and managing people. So as just a quick synopsis, the best way to describe this is to say that I just had a really corrupt upbringing. My mother died when I was very young, and my father was probably just the most psychologically abusive person that I've ever met in my life. Somebody introduced me recently to a book by Scott Peck, and he defined evil. And as I was reading it, I realized for the first time that he was describing my father. He was
Wow.
someone who really intended to destroy my sense of well-being, my personal spirit. He really wanted me to believe that I could never amount to anything in my life, and so growing up with that kind of abuse, psychologically screaming constantly, never really feeling that I had love and support from my own father, he ended up kicking me out of the house right after high school graduation with complete surprise. As bad as it was growing up, I can tell you I never anticipated that. I thought he would pay for my college education and at least get me going that way, and so he didn't. And it was
And could he
emotional.
afford it?
Oh, he was a very, very wealthy man by that time in his career. Surprisingly, he was, if I told you what he did for a living, you'd be astonished because he was a very, very successful businessman and has somehow managed to hide his inner personality and the way he operated. But
Mm.
so he was very wealthy. It was nothing to do with money. Had to do with really, truly trying to make sure that I didn't succeed. That was a very perverse way to raise a child, but that's what I grew up with. And
Mm.
so when he kicked me out of the house, there was no financial support. There was no, here's your first month's rent, here's food for your pantry, come on over on Sundays for dinner. We're still your parents. I had a stepmother after my mother died. None of that. I never went
Ah.
back. And so it was a very big struggle for me, to say the least, to get through college. And I think I was really determined to get through college more to prove to him that I would amount to something. And so when I started managing people, I got into banking and financial services out of college, and I started managing people. What I didn't realize was that I had always known what I always wanted as, growing up. And so I instinctively decided to give people all the support that I'd always wanted and never got.
Mm.
So I just expressed my belief in them and made them feel safe and taught them everything that I knew. And I got to know them personally, and I was really motivated to accelerate their growth and their development. And so I encouraged them and I praised them and I recognized them, and I really helped them maximize their potential. If they had ambitions for their career, it was my dream to help it make sure it came true. And I got a lot of personal fulfillment from this, and honestly, as I was writing the book, I realized how much it helped me heal from a growing up experience. But the important thing from this was that I realized through the course of my career that as I progressed from a junior level to all the way up to 2 national level positions for one of the largest financial institutions in the country, that it didn't matter what I was managing, what responsibilities I had, or the people, their responsibilities more specifically. The people that I managed, regardless of their jobs, responded to this because it's human. It's what people need. And so I had this unusual situation where the institution that I was working ended up being sold, and so I decided rather than staying with the new organization that I was going to leave, and I made the decision I'm going to write this book. And my ambition in writing the book was really just to share certain practices that I'd learned in my career that if you put them in place, if you did these practices together, that you could have this just amazing impact on people and then therefore on the success of your teams and the success of your organization. So that was the idea of the book. So
Ah,
I spent 10 months putting this all together, and a friend of mine very casually said to me, using his language, he says, you're going to have to explain why these practices work. Otherwise, people are going to think you needed to have a shitty childhood in order to lead this way.
good
And
point.
and I knew he was right, and I hadn't given it any thought. I just took it on faith that these work for me, they'll work for you. And so when I realized what he was saying to me, I had to think about, well, what is it? What was I doing that was so impactful? What was the reaction? What was going on inside of people that made them this loyal, this committed, this excited, this committed to doing magnificent work, which is what I got from people. And so sitting exactly where I am, it hit me about a week later that I had been affecting the hearts in people. Now, you might think, well, that's a wonderful epiphany, but for me it was a disaster because I thought, I've wasted a year of my life here because I've just come out of an organization like all organizations where you use the word heart and they think you're either, you've had a religious revitalization or, you
Right.
don't get business, right? We think the heart is soft and weak and kryptonite in leadership. And so I literally got depressed for about a week until it dawned on me, I know I'm right. I've been managing people my whole career. I know I'm having an impact on people. I don't know what it is, but I reached out to a world-class cardiologist and explained my thesis. And she said, I want you to understand something. I went and met with her, and she had done a whole lot of research on the intelligence of the heart. She said, I'm just going to tell you, she didn't even like have an introductory remark at all. I sat down and she said, you need to know something. You figured out something that we in science have just figured out, that the heart has always been perceived to be just a pump, and we now know that it has intelligence and that feeling and emotion really drive human behavior. So when you're caring about your people, when you're supporting them, when you're doing the things that help actualize them, you're actually having this biological impact on them, and that makes them want to respond in kind. And so everything you're telling me is validated by science, and we're only discovering it in science ourselves. Well, at
Wow.
that moment, to answer it's a long way to get to the answer of your question, I realized I have something really important to share here. I really have a message to say that the way we lead people is fundamentally flawed because we think we need to pay people a little and squeeze as much out of them as possible. And what I discovered, Dana, is that it's just the opposite. The more you care about people, the more I'm going to use the word, but, people think, oh, you can't use that word in business, but the more you love your people, the more you're going to get out of them. It has to be authentic. You can't manipulate it. And I see a lot of companies doing that. I see a lot of companies creating technologies to do that.
Right.
So my ambition is really to spread this message and to convince business leaders all over the world, because it's human, it's not just any one state or any one industry, it's human, that this is the way we need to lead.
That is just such a great description. And it just shows me that your passion is so deep-seated and comes from such a long um, period and evolution of your own soul. And then to have it validated by science had to be just so rewarding and probably helped you have the confidence to continue to do something that, like you said, mainstream businesses are not yet accepting it. And though many that are pretending. I see that too. I see them talking about teamwork and doing all these things that are intended to look like they care, but you really can't feign that. You can't really pretend. So your ambition to really make a change in the way people care and lead with their heart is so needed. So needed.
Well, Dana, you have a fantastic insight. I have to tell you, just listening to you.
Well, thank you.
What I realized though is that we need to start putting different kinds of people into management roles. That is a big problem. We know that managers are principally the ones that drive engagement. People leave their direct supervisor. They don't leave companies. We've all known that for a long time, but it's been confirmed by enormous amounts of research. But what we know to be true is that, anyone who's listening in, if I were to ask you, think about the boss that you love, the one that got the best work out of you, you would describe them with all the qualities of the behaviors that I'm advocating. And yet, most of us think about our bosses and we think about people that do just the opposite, because that's what we've taught them to do in business. We've taught them to try to squeeze and treat people like they're just cogs in the wheel. I hate to use language like that, but it's really true. I mean, we just, we're not really looking at the humanity of people, and that's the fundamental mistake.
It's a fundamental mistake, and it happens all the time. I've seen it in large corporations. I've seen it, just heartlessness. I have seen it in medium-sized businesses, and even in little small companies can get into the internal competition and using fear management, and it's so destructive, and it really depletes people's confidence and their productivity. And so in your book, I know you talked a lot about that, and it's now being taught in 2 universities. It should be taught everywhere. And the companion book should be The Extraordinary Workplace, Replacing Fear with Trust and Compassion, because you and I, although we use some different terminology, you did a lot of research. My research was more based on my experience working with a lot of organizations. We really are coming up with some very universal principles that are true and have always been true, but somehow our businesses and our business model has not used it. It's really been operating, would you agree with this, more from greed than coming together as a team, valuing people?
Well, yes, the answer is yes, and it goes back, at least to the Industrial Revolution, where owners had companies and they had people that were working for them, and they were doing, less sophisticated work that didn't need any kind of collaboration, and they would put people at the machine, and they said, we're going to pay you based on your productivity, and if you don't do good work, you're out because we can easily replace you. And so it was a very, very impersonal, threatening, fear kind of environment, and we've carried this forward. That's traditional leadership theory. Pay people as little as possible and squeeze as much out of them as possible. We say, companies say, our people are our greatest asset, and yet we account for them on the balance sheet as a liability. And so what that means is that CFOs and companies, when they're looking to drive up earnings, the most expensive, the greatest cost to a business is people.
Right.
And so the logic is, let's just cut something. Let's take something away from these people. It's either ours, or we're going to cut their benefits, or we're going to do something that's going to have a harm to people because we think that that's going to have a better impact on our bottom line. This carries over from 100 years ago, but it's just the opposite. The organizations that have figured this out have already, they're making the biggest investments. They're the most generous organizations out there. The more you give to people, the more you get back. And this is a belief system that is not common in business, and it needs to be.
Well, I have sat in on many board meetings where the subject was cutting the budget, and they go to the people, and they try to manage people. I'm sure you've seen this too, by data spreadsheets. And rather, I liken it to, they point to a scoreboard at the football game and say, that's the score we want, and they forget to involve the players and the coaches and work with the actual people, and then they measure the results based on they wanted the numbers to change. And in the way they treat people, I have another metaphor. I feel like they're often shooting a hole in the gas tank, which is the human resources, the human capital, and then they wonder why we're not getting good mileage.
That's great. Well, the answer is that we think that money is the motivator for people. We think that a paycheck and a job and a paycheck is sufficient motivation. And so when managers say, here's true north, go get this job done, they think that money is going to do it. And pay now ranks fifth of importance to people all over the world. It ranks no higher than fifth of importance as a motivator of people's engagement and real full commitment. People need much more from work than they ever needed before, and we're still managing the old way, thinking, hey, let's just create an incentive system, let's give them a bonus, some money-related component that's going to drive performance, and that's not, people need a paycheck and they need an income and people need to negotiate their best deals, but once that happens, it stops being a day-to-day motivator, and that's what most people don't understand.
That is so true, and that's the exact feedback I get. I was looking at how I know you've just written a lot of articles for Fast Company, and I've read numerous articles, and I know you have a huge readership. What I'm wondering is, why do you think you have such a huge readership, and what does that mean for the vast majority of people that are working? Maybe not even the leaders, but people that are reading your articles.
So going back to the very first thing you said, which is you said, I'm seeking to give people permission to lead this way, to care about people. And I think that's really what's happening here, is that people feel in their own organizations. I get especially, I had a ton of exchanges with the students at Northern Arizona University that had 4 different classes teaching the book this semester, and I was talking to all of them. And one of the things that kept coming up was, how do I lead like this when my boss doesn't? How do I lead like this when my company doesn't?
Exactly.
And so I think one of the reasons that people are interested in this is like, can I really do this? Can you really get away with this? Is this really successful? And so my purpose in writing these articles is to say, yes, I'm trying to convince people.
Right.
And by a drip effect. And so because there have been like 6 or 7 of them that have been the most read article on Fast Company, and that just tells me people are desperate for this. They really want to know, yes, you can lead like this. We should be running organizations like this. And there are organizations like this.
And I agree that people are hungry for it. I have been speaking to thousands and thousands of people everywhere, and I'm just going to say what I say very bluntly to the audience. I say to them, because I talk about enlightened leadership, which is, to me is, true leadership, authentic leadership, but I tell them, unfortunately, what I see most often in the workplace is a web of egos that battle and compete for power. And I see managers that disempower employees, and I see coworkers who hurt and sabotage one another. I see pain, I see sabotage, I see gossip, I see territorialism, protecting your territory, and most of all, I see fear. And then I ask my audience, how many of you know what I'm talking about? And I'm talking about thousands and thousands of people in different audiences. And guess how many hands go up? Pretty much.
Not many.
No, they all recognize it.
Oh, I was thinking, I'm sure they recognize it.
Yeah.
I was thinking they didn't want to raise their hand so their boss would say,
well,
why'd you raise your hand?
That's another good point. When I'm talking to just one company, I have to say to them, in that other workplace, did you see that? But when I'm talking to a conference and these people are all coming from different places, I should have made that distinction for you, Mark. These people from different places, everyone's hand goes up, because whether they're a leader or not, everybody's aware of it, but they're afraid to do anything about it. So I'm really kind of saying, I understand why you are getting a huge readership, not only probably from leaders, but people that want to be happier at work, no matter what level they're at, because really, in a way, everybody's a leader wherever they are. Just some are on a organizational chart are higher up, but I think everybody can help make a difference in the workplace. I have some different topics that are statements that you've made to me. You and I have had some great conversation. I want to just kind of go through some of these and see what you have to say about it. And
Aren't you clever?
And I'll add to it anything that I've thought about it. But this first statement, I think I read this in something else you wrote. You said more people today enjoy their commutes to and from work than the jobs they're going to. Is that really true?
This was reported by Gallup probably 6, 7 years ago. And isn't that a distressing fact? just to think about that. You know, you have your music on, you're driving, and then all of a sudden you pull into the lot and you get that sick feeling inside.
Yep.
The counterpoint to that, Dana, is that the University of Aberdeen, Great Britain, one of the oldest universities in the world, their business school did a study, and I wrote about this in my book, and they found this is true for the first time in human history, that work now defines our overall happiness with our lives. So it used to be we would go to work and then our spouses, our children, our hobbies, those were the things that we really, we work to live. Now we live to work. We give so much of our life to it that we're looking to be happy. We're looking to be fulfilled. We're looking for meaning and significance. We want to know that the work we do matters for something. It's deeply important to human beings. It's deeply important to me. I'm sure it's deeply important to everyone. And so if you've got people that are that miserable, think about the gap. Think about the disconnect.
Oh, I know. And I just think, everybody is looking for their dream job, and then they finally land it, and then in a way they it may have all the qualities that they thought in terms of benefits and title and even income, but if they're unhappy and they get that, I've had that sick feeling when I pulled into the parking lot, and it was due directly to the person I reported to, the chief of operations, the chief operating officer, and in one of the companies that I did work for as the marketing director. And to think that people go to work, they spend 3/4 of their waking hours in the workplace or more, because workaholism probably causes alcoholism, but workaholism is promoted. It's considered like a good trait in today's workplace. And so that again is going to affect the very fabric of your life, because then you go home to your families, and we're talking about most people, because most people work. They go home to their families from this unhappy work experience, and it's got to affect the rest of their day. So altogether, it's a really, really sad situation that really needs to be changed. So
You're absolutely right.
let's look at, we have a global crisis where job satisfaction and employee engagement have reached historic lows. Do you want to give some of those statistics?
In 1987, the Conference Board, which is a research organization based in New York City, I think they just had their centennial, so they've been doing research of all kinds. They do the Consumer Price Index and the leading indicator reports, and they're non-denominational. They don't have a dog in any fight. And they have been cleverly, gratefully, monitoring employee satisfaction in the United States and employee engagement all across the world, like 160 different countries since 1987. Wow. And if you could take your hand and put it out in front of you and then just tip it as steep as you can, that's what they have found has happened since 1987. It's been on a steep and steady decline ever since.
Oh my gosh.
So you kind of wonder, what would have happened if they started it in 1977 or 67? How long has it been going on? And so, and then the Gallup organization has been doing similar work for almost as long, and I've gotten very intimate with them and I've written several articles about their work, and it's completely consistent. We know basically that, today they reported, 31.5% of the American working population is engaged in their job. That's basically 70% aren't.
I know, that's the one that I have quoted so often. I can't believe that only a third of the people are not even a third, are even engaged in work. That doesn't even necessarily mean they're really happy. It means they're present and they're, maybe being productive. But think of 70% disengaged. Think what would happen. Yeah, think about
what you turned it around, right?
Exactly.
It's, the Google organization, their whole belief system, which is completely what I agree with, is what would it be like if you had everyone engaged? How do you make everyone engaged? I've worked with a lot of different people in my life. Let's say you have a team of maybe 12 people, and you have your goals. And every team has an all-star or a couple of all-stars, just people who are just, no matter what happens, no matter what you do to them, they're going to be fantastic. And what a lot of managers have figured out is, you know what, I can get by with people doing whatever they do as long as I have 2 or 3 all-stars who will carry me.
Right.
And that is just such flawed thinking. If you could just say, well, if you can succeed by having 2 or 3 or 4 people out of that 12 really killing it, what would it be like if everyone was fulfilled? What would it be like if all 12 could be really contributing? And this is a whole different line of thinking that we need to get.
Well, and I agree with that, and that's what I write about in my book, that everybody wants to contribute. And actually, everyone has some brilliance. My metaphor for that is it's like a symphony. Every part is important. So to focus only on 1 or 2 people in a team, for example, instead of recognizing that every single person has something valuable to contribute is so short-sighted.
It takes a lot of work to lead people, Dana. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy, and it's just a lot easier to tell the symphony, here's the music, play it, and if you do well, I'll reward you, and if you don't do well, I'm going to get somebody else in your position. Than it is to say, I'm going to sit down with the violinist personally, and I'm going to teach the cellist a little bit of what I know, and the person with piccolo, and the person with cymbals, and I mean, that takes up a lot of time, and a lot of people just don't have the instinct to care that much about other people and their well-being. It's sort of like there's, I think Stephen Covey was the first person that I read about the distinction of an abundance mindset, and this idea that the world is abundant, it's not scarce. And so we approach business from a scarcity standpoint, which says everyone's a threat to me. So why am I going to teach the violinist more than I know, everything that I've learned, because he or she may take over my job as the conductor. This is a big fear. It works just the opposite. The more you teach, the more you develop, the better they do, the better you do. That's my viewpoint.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's been my experience. I've had some great teams with that approach, that I spent time with each one, helping them with their, parts in the whole team goal vision, and it truly works. You see people energized and excited when they feel that they have the skills and somebody's supporting them, and not, more of a coaching approach rather than the critical pointing out what you've done wrong approach. It's amazing what you see people accomplish. And, sometimes people think that what we're talking about, love and caring, is kind of a weakness. How would you describe the sense of love in the workplace? When you say love people, is there a word that, can help people understand you're not talking about a weakness?
Yeah, that's really good, Dana. I think care would be the word. It's caring about your people. And just to kind of go back and tie these pieces together here, I think that not everybody gets that joy that you were just describing. Not everyone gets that. When my people, the people that work for me, when they would succeed, when they would excel, it was like thrilling for me. Mm-hmm. Not everybody in a management role has that inclination, and so when I give speeches, I absolutely make this point, that we should not be hiring managers going forward in any organization if we're not convinced that the person we're going to give the management title to cares about the well-being of other people. And so, unfortunately, it's sort of a binary thing. You either have it or you don't have it.
Right.
And so, but the love thing is really interesting because it's, I think I'm at an advantage because I'm a male.
I know, you told me that before. Explain that to the audience.
Well, I mean, I think, like it or not in business, we're probably more likely to hear the word care and support and even love from a woman than we are a man, because we've brainwashed men into saying, you don't want to get that close to your people, and you want to treat them indifferently, because if you get too close to them, they'll abuse you, they'll take advantage of you, and that's going to hurt profitability, so just don't go there. And it's messy. It takes too much time and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I managed stockbrokers. You know, my last job, I was managing these high commission stockbrokers. Everybody said, oh, you can't manage the way you manage with them. And I did, got the same exact response. And so I have the confidence that there really isn't a job out there that doesn't respond to what I'm talking about. So that kind of gave me permission to use the word love. But really what happened was I started to digest a lot of the positive psychology research,
Mm-hmm.
and I found a woman named Barbara Fredrickson, who's a professor and a positive psychology expert at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And she'd written a book called Love 2.0. And what she said, and this is really profound and gives just, again, just tremendous validation, another part of the synchronicity of my life of finding people who have information that can validate this message.
Mm-hmm.
And so what she said is she's been studying emotions and specifically the effect of positive emotions on human beings. And what she discovered is that we thrive on them, that we are wired as human beings to thrive on positive emotions. She also discovered, so you think about what are those positive emotions? They're like joy and enthusiasm and excitement and awe and love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Mark, we've found that they're all love. Awe is love, excitement is love, appreciation is love. So
Ah,
when you're caring for people, when you're spending time with them and saying, hey, let me teach you a little bit about what I've learned, or let me hear about your career goals, let me see if we can develop a plan to help you get there. That's love.
that's
And I was so afraid to say that because I thought, well, you've already put the word heart in my book, which was like, you know, enough to shoot me in the stomach a million times. So how am I going to get away with saying love? But now it's like science is there, you know.
yes. This
So I'm doing the full Monty here.
You are, and I'm going to make it even more revealing because I'm going to add something, and you know, you can respond however you want, but I agree with everything you've said, and maybe because I'm a woman, I believe everybody is love, and I believe that love is the power that sustains all life. I believe that it is a spiritual energy that connects all of us, whether you want to call it the universe or a power greater than us or nature or just our connection to something greater. And so to me, when what you're describing and what the author that you just mentioned were describing different emotions, I think they all stem from love, and I think that love's the reason we exist. A baby won't even thrive without love. And so why do we think that grown-ups don't need it anymore and that they're going to be just fine like machines? To me, it's just
Well,
insane.
we see a baby, our instinct is to go up and talk to it and hug it. Same thing with a puppy,
Yes,
right? But
yes.
I'll tell you, you triggered something inside of me that I don't think I've ever shared with anyone
Oh,
before. But
wonderful.
since you know my background, I can tell you that particularly writing the preface of the book was something that I thought was going to kill me. In the process of writing it, I had tremendous doubt as to whether or not I could pull it off because it triggered all the stuff that I had
Ah,
grown up with. You can't do this. You're not that person. And so in the process of doing it and struggling through it, I started to notice I'd go for a walk on the beach and people would put heart shapes in the beach.
mm,
Or I'd go for a hike in the mountains and I'd see they'd carve a heart into the mountains. I can't tell you the number of times that I saw the heart somewhere or you know,
ah,
just pieces of people, you know, little. I mean, I can't even tell you the collection of hearts that I picked up, and I started to realize this is sort of like signs from the universe that you're supposed to do this, you
I
know. But but it's also like this is what we express ourselves with. Why would we go to the beach and put a big heart in the sand? You know, it's like you're right. I mean, this is how people are. You know, it's what we're supposed to
exactly.
get.
And to see and take note of all of those signs from the universe, I believe. And I want to top it off and tell you I'm a big sign for you because not only is heart my symbol, I was born on Valentine's Day. So hearts have always
Wow.
been dear to me. And I teach about love in the workplace and love that sustains all life and love that shines far and wide. In fact, I coined a word called love shine And I say if sunshine emanates from the sun, love shine emanates from our heart. And I believe we do. And scientists can tell us now that we do have an energy field and we emanate that energy. HeartMath has done a lot of work in that area. I think you've talked about that too. So, we're getting
But let me
into,
tell you,
go ahead.
let me tell you, Dana. The thing is we're all here, nodding our heads in agreement. But I will tell you that, and I had to go back and rewrite my LinkedIn biography, and basically what it says is that every intelligent person, people that are trained and paid consultants, told me, you go out with a title called Lead from the Book and you will fail.
Lead from the
Just
heart.
today,
You said lead from the book.
Lead from the heart.
Yeah, you said lead
Oh,
from
I'm
the
sorry,
book.
lead from, thank you, lead
Yeah.
from the heart. I mean, if you go out with a title Lead from the Heart, you're going to fail. And so while we know this is all true, the whole purpose of all the articles that I write is just to slow drip on people to get them to see that this is the truth. Because our instinctive reaction to this is, it ain't the truth. It's soft, it's weak, it undermines productivity, no way, no how.
Exactly.
That is how most people in business treat this. And it's a struggle to get people to go, no, wait, let me just kind of lay it out here for you. And every time I go into an organization and I give a speech, they're just stunned. Because it's like, I think we all want to know that you can do this.
Yes.
We all want to know that this will work.
Exactly. And so you and I have talked a little bit about this. Sometimes it is hard doing this work because, and maybe many of you on the call are in this same camp and already realize this, but there are, I would say the majority, in fact, the vast majority of people that still don't really, just like you said, believe we can operate this way. And so we have quite a mission. I feel like those of us that do understand it and want to do the slow drip, and drip is, slow drip to gradually help the shift of people's thinking. So some of the things I know we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, we probably should get to some of the more practical things that you recommend that leaders can do. And in fact, I've had a couple of questions, and one of them might fit to what you're talking about. Somebody asked me that said, I'm a new supervisor and I want to get started on the right foot with people that I supervise. And so maybe you could answer, what are some of the things leaders that are operating from this powerful energy of love and caring about their employees, what are some of the things they can do, that people like something that they know the mind can wrap itself around? I can do this and this will help.
Well, that's a very good question. So I'm glad somebody's asking that, because this is all very practical. This is not pie in the sky here. It's your behavior. It's what you do with people, how you interact with them, how you make people feel, that translates into whether or not people feel good about you and feel good about their work. That's how it works.
Yes.
Feelings and emotions drive behavior. So if I'm a new supervisor and I've got a new team, first thing you do is to start with like some empathy. What would I be feeling like if I had a new boss? I'd be thinking fear. I'd be thinking he or she's going to change my job. He or she's not going to like me. He or she's not going to think I'm good. Right? And this is sort of like the first thing. This is what my concerns would be.
Right.
And so the first thing I would say is sit down with your people individually, meet with them. And you can meet with them as a team and say, hey, I'm going to get together with all of you. I want to find out all about you. I want to find out who you are and what you do, but I really want to get to know you personally, and I'm here to be your advocate. I'm here to make sure that you get from work what you want to work at. And everybody wants something different. I had a manager once come to me. I was a regional manager, and she came to me. I had a monthly meeting with my 35 managers that were reported to me. And she came to me and she said, I would like to plan your meetings. And I said, why? And she said, because I love doing that kind of stuff. And she was like one of the top managers in the company, and so my instinctive reaction was, it's going to hurt her performance. And so I said, I'm not so sure. So she said, well, I really love it, and I'll do a good job, and so why don't we just try it? So it was a no risk for me. Well,
Right.
She did a fabulous job on the meetings, and then she did a fabulous job back at work, because she was getting to do something that was a variety.
And you listened. And you listened. You didn't just say no, you really listened, and then you tried it.
Yeah, I don't know where that instinct came from, but I'm grateful for it because everybody is different. Everyone wants something different. I had another woman that I wrote about in the book who she wanted my job. She didn't want my job specifically. She wanted me to get promoted so she could get my job. And she came into my office one day and she said, "You're not doing enough to develop me." And I said, "Really? Okay, so what do I need to do?" So she goes, "Well, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this." So I said, "All right, I'll put a plan together and we'll do it." So we did, and she's a regional manager today and thriving and doing really great. And each person is different, and so it's really identify what they need, identify what they want, and commit to giving it to them to the extent that you can. You know, if they say, "I want $1,000,000, you can't give them that, but you say, "Well, what else can I give you if I can't give you that?" So you find something that you can commit to. I think, you know, go ahead.
I wanted to comment on the way you handled it when she said you're not developing me enough, because I've worked with a lot of managers who, quite frankly, their greatest fear is the people underneath them want their job. And so they feel fearful, and rather than help develop them so that they could all rise up in the company and possibly that manager would go to a new position at some point, they would squelch the person beneath them, literally. They would, whether it was conscious or unconscious, they didn't help them. They were too threatened. Have you seen that?
Oh, completely. I mean, we're so threatened by our people that we don't want to do it. And you know, so I wasn't threatened by her, and I really wanted to help her. And here's an example of karma, and then I'm going to give you a real world example in your own neck of the woods of one of the most abusive ways of managing people.
Okay.
So I ended up writing this book 10 years after that woman worked for me. And I called her up and told her that I was going to write the book, and she said, "I want to spend 3 hours with you, and I want to tell you all the things that need to go in your book." One of the most helpful people. So it all came back to me.
Wow.
It all was just wonderfully generous person. She's one of my dearest friends, and you know, no threat.
Oh, that gave me chills.
It's the way it works.
Yeah, exactly.
You reap what you sow in life, and there is karma, you know. And so Microsoft is a perfect example. Steve Ballmer, who now owns the LA Clippers,
Yes.
but is the former CEO of Microsoft.
Yes.
And he created a methodology where out of 10 people, only 2 or 3 of them could be judged as superior. The other 6 or 7 would be judged as average, and the bottom would be fired. Seriously.
Oh my gosh.
And so what you had was, that meant that only a couple of people out of every 10 could really get good bonuses, get good reviews, get good salary increases, be up for promotion. And so what it did was it drove people to compete with each other, to sabotage each other,
Of course.
to all of that, right? And it's so if you can create a structure where everyone can win, then people collaborate, they work together really well as teams, they look out for each other, they want to teach each other. It's a fantastic way to run a business. And by the way, their new CEO came in and completely obliterated that whole process, but it went on for years. And if you look at the stock performance, which is financial measure of everything that I'm talking about, Microsoft stock did nothing during the years that Steve Ballmer was there. And if you compared it to organizations that did, it was infinitely better.
Wow.
So you can't destroy people and then expect that it's going to be effective for working. So I completely agree with you.
Well, and you know, that is such a good example where it was clearly defined, but I have observed in lots of companies it may not be defined that way specifically, but that's still the feeling that only a few can succeed. And so that underlying feeling is everybody does have to compete for their moment in the sunshine, and they get very competitive with each other rather than working toward reaching the goals, and it just destroys it. The role of the leader, it so clearly sets the tone for the whole organization. And
we think, Dana, that we need to be frugal with recognition, and it's just the opposite. I found that you can't recognize people, you know, unless you're going, "I love you, I love you, I love you, you're great, you're great, you're great." You're not going to do that in the real world, right? But if I'll give you an example of a guy that I worked for once who he had about 12 regional managers working for him. So all 12 of these people, I was one of them, were running huge parts of the organization, huge, huge, huge businesses, right?
Right.
And he created a recognition program, and he called it the Olympics. So he came from A, he wants to do recognition. B, he's got a theme. And he tells everyone the top 3 of you every month are going to get up on on the stands, visualize the Olympics, and we're going to give you medals, and we're going to play the Olympic theme. And it all sounds really great, right?
Yes.
But if you're 4th that month and if you were hitting all of your goals, if you were doing really wonderful work, you didn't get recognized because you were 3rd. And that is so narrow. So if you've got 12 people and they're all hitting their goals, all 12 people need to get recognition. That's how you make people thrive.
Absolutely.
And this isn't the way we think it works.
No. These are such good points. I'm going to look at, we may not get to all the things that I wrote down that I thought we could talk about, but kind of this sort of summarizes what you're saying. It isn't a worker problem, it's a leadership problem. And
completely.
Yes, completely. And basically what we're saying, both of us are saying, that I call it the top-down fear management style. You said our traditional ways of managing are failing, and we need an entirely new model of leadership to support the needs of the 21st century workers. So you and I are out there. There are others, of course, but we're out there promoting that this is the only way is to completely change the management style to one of compassion and heart and caring and valuing. So you also said this requires that we break historic and misinformed taboos and bring more heart into management. You've given us a lot of examples of that. And I thought maybe before we close that we can maybe see, maybe between the two of us, we could both take a look at some of these other questions that have come in. What do you think about this person? Colleen wrote in and said, I think I'm a good manager, but people don't seem that loyal. They up and leave whenever they get better off. Isn't that the trend these days? What would you say to that?
No, I think that turnover is one of the greatest representations of management effectiveness there is. So if you've got people leaving, they're probably leaving because of you.
So
what do you think, Darren?
Yes, I totally agree. I would say, Colleen, you and anybody that has a feeling that your employees aren't feeling loyal, or your team members, or the people that report to you, then I think it's time to take a really good look and think about why are they feeling that way, and what is your part in it? Because I so often hear people blaming it on the employees, or I just the other day had this guy saying he couldn't even find good help that stayed very long. And I think all of us could benefit by completely switching our focus off of what the employee is doing wrong and focus on what can I as a leader do right. So Colleen, I think some of the things that we've been talking about and what Mark suggested, working individually with people and really finding out what they need would go a long way to build their loyalty. And ultimately, all of you want to reach the company goals. And if people feel valued by they're going to be a lot more loyal.
So one thing I'd add, is it Colleen?
Yes.
The person? Okay. One of the things that I really discovered in this process is that the moment of truth for leaders is when you're not hitting your goals and you're taking crap from your people above you. Mm-hmm. And you have a decision to make. Mm-hmm. Do I start managing in fear and threaten people and stress people out by my presence, or do I rise to the occasion and make a different decision? Because when I found myself in that situation, if I told people, nope, I believe in you, I wouldn't have hired you if I didn't think you had the talent to do this, we're going to double down on looking back on what are the things that we know that will lead to the results we want, but it's not a question of whether we can do it. So if you believe in your people and you're there for them, they're not going to want to leave you. They're just not going to want to leave you.
And that I can give you an example of that. My daughter is a really skilled marketing professional, and she works in the healthcare industry, actually in cancer, oncology, diagnostic research. She recently left a job, an extremely well-paying job, took another job with the company taking a substantial decrease in her base salary, but with opportunity to grow, with a company that she really believed in. She wouldn't have left a company and taken that dramatic drop in pay if she'd been treated the way that she deserved to be treated for how she worked. And now she left, and her new company really values her. They have goals. They do have financial rewards that probably ultimately will far out pay the original or previous company. But I looked at her company and many companies, and I watched them lose people, and they never questioned themselves, what could we have done differently to keep these good people? They just look at it as another, kind of almost a job mill and people mill, and we'll just replace that person, and they're losing all the longevity and understanding and knowledge of the people that they have. So that what you just said is so true, and I put that as the number one trait of a truly authentic leader, is that they look within and they're willing to see their own issues and not project them onto the people that they lead, but instead value and inspire and promote and give the you can do it attitude to the people that they lead. So I'm going to take one more question because it is getting very close to the top of the hour. Let's see, which one should I take? I have several here. Oh, this person said, I get upset and react when people, especially my boss, criticize me. I then feel myself being critical of the people I supervise. What should I do?
Mm. It takes a lot of courage, but passing it on is the worst thing you can do, because people know. The word gets out. If you're being yelled at by your boss or you're being treated badly, it becomes obvious, and your employees will honor you and circle around you and support you if they can see that you made a different choice. It's human, it's instinctive to say, well, I'm getting yelled at, so you guys are getting yelled at, and that's just sort of a weak approach to it. And I actually think there's a reciprocal side to this too, which is that there were times when I was under tremendous pressure and being micromanaged, and would love to have taken it back to my team, and I didn't. And over time, my boss got to see that he wanted me to manage that way. He wanted me to go out there and yell at people and I wasn't going to do it. And it tempered him. He stopped doing it. He saw the example and said, wow, you can still get performance out of people. And he did, not that it went away entirely, can't change people's character fully, but I saw change in him. But I would urge you not to pass it on, and just don't. Fear is the single worst energy on the planet. It doesn't do people any good. It doesn't make people work any harder. It doesn't make them work any better. If it does, it's only in the short term. And in the long term, they're thinking about how fast can I get out of working here? And that's not what you want.
Exactly. My metaphor for that is you can beat a horse and it'll run faster for a little while, but you'll either kill the horse or it'll run away. So I think on that note, we probably are going to have to wrap it up. That this topic is just so expansive, Mark. I would love to do this again. I feel like we only barely started on some of the highlights of what a truly great workplace, what I call an extraordinary workplace, can be like if we have leaders that lead from the heart. So I hope you're game to do this again in a few weeks.
Well, it's fantastic. I'd love to do it, Dan. It's really cool to do it with you because you get it. You get it. You're living it yourself, which is wonderful.
Well, thank you, and I feel the same about you, and you've been so warm and accessible, and you truly embody the traits that you're talking about in a leader that leads from the heart. And so I thank you so much for sharing with our audience today. For the audience, if you want to get a hold of either one of us, these are our websites. It's pretty easy. It's just our name. We both have a Facebook page if you want to join our tribes or talk to us about any issues you might have, or if you are a group looking for a speaker, if you're a university looking for books, if you are somebody that wants just personal business coaching or consulting with your organization, or if you're an organization that's looking for keynote speakers, we both do that. And I don't even know if I mentioned that Mark's down in La Jolla and I'm in Bellevue, the Seattle area. So we both are just, we both love sharing our message in any way that we can. So thank you, audience, for attending. Thank you, Mark, for
Thank
being,
everyone.
yes, thank you. And I'm
Honored by
closing.
the audience.
Thank you. Bye-bye.